Assalamu alaikum. We have just launched our Fight with Light fundraising campaign for Seekers Hub Global, where our goal is to raise $60,000 in monthly donations by the end of the year, and all of this money will go towards fighting ignorance and fighting hatred and fighting extremism by spreading the light of knowledge and the light of guidance and the light of the way of our Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam. We hope that you'll join us in this fight, and you can do so by becoming a monthly donor at seekershub.org/donate.
Today, inshallah, we're going to begin with a very sensitive question, the question of life and death. And these are matters that highlight also the practicality and balance of our deen. Someone asked, what is the ruling of a woman who is pregnant and affected by the Zika virus? Is it permitted for her to get an abortion? Is it permitted for a woman affected by the Zika virus to get an abortion? And the short answer is there's some detail regarding this. In general, the ruling of abortion in Islam is not an absolute prohibition, but a general prohibition. Right? It is a general prohibition and not an absolute prohibition. One of these is that while Islam affirms the absolute sanctity of life, we know from the various texts of the Quran that are miraculous texts, really, because it was knowledge not found at the time of revelation, and then affirmed very clearly in a number of explicit hadiths of the Prophet ﷺ, such as the hadith of Abdullah ibn Mas'ud. That's one of the opening hadiths of the 40 Nawawi, that talk about the stages of the development of the human embryo, and then it is at 120 days, right, after 3 series of 40 days, that ثُمَّ يُنْفَخُ فِيهِ الرُّوحِ. Then, upon 120 days, the Prophet ﷺ said, then the soul is breathed into it. Right? Then the soul is breathed into it. So the human embryo before 120 days is on the verge of being a full human being. It's on the verge of being a full human being. So they have the sanctity of being a human being, but not the complete sanctity of being a human being. So in the first 120 days, the general ruling of abortion is impermissibility. Right? So they get pregnant, they don't want to have the child, you can't just say, okay, well, go have an abortion. Right? That is not permitted, because the embryo has a sanctity. Right? This is the creating of Allah. However, in that period of time, because the soul has not been breathed into it yet, if there is a genuine excuse, harm particularly to the mother, if there are major disabilities, for example, or in tragic cases, a woman was raped, for example, or in cases where, for example, someone made a mistake and they committed zina, for example, and they're living with their parents, and if they were to seek an abortion, if they were to carry through the pregnancy and so on, it would cause major harm to them in their family and also in their life, right? So in those situations, and there's a range of opinions amongst the fuqaha. Some schools, particularly the Maliki, are more strict on that, and some are more expansive with respect to that. But within the first 120 days, there is, when there is a genuine situation of hardship or harm, then abortion would be permissible. So, given that, if someone is affected by the Zika virus, for example, and expert medical opinion tells them that there's genuine fear, right? There is what's called khawfun mu'tabar, for serious disabilities for the child, for example, etc., of a major kind that the Zika virus, for example, is known to potentially cause. So in such a case, there's a number of leading fiqh bodies, amongst them Darul Ifta al-Masriya, and a number of leading contemporary scholars that have mentioned, that have affirmed that before 120 days, if it is found, if the mother has the Zika virus, is going to be there's a serious risk of major disabilities for the child, for example, then there is permission for abortion in that case, before 120 days. However, once after 120 days, generally, disabilities are not sufficient excuse for the abortion of a child. Generally. Right? The governing permission with respect to the abortion of a child after 120 days, because now this is a child that is yet unborn, right? Because the soul has been breathed into it. So then there's two complete sanctities: the sanctity of the mother's life and the sanctity of the child, right? So generally, it would only be permitted to abort if there was genuine fear for the mother's life. There's genuine fear for the mother's life. For example, there's some rare cases where the mother starts bleeding, right? And it's a situation, and I dealt with such a case, and I consulted a number of senior fuqaha about it, where if the mother goes through with the pregnancy, she may not stop bleeding. And it may, her life is genuinely at risk. Then, genuine fear of the mother's life, or major harm to her, that consideration is given precedence over the baby's life, right? If it's a question of the two. And as in most details of fiqh, there will be some difference on this. But in such cases, however, one of the things that is a support both of legal clarity and practical religious support and guidance and spiritual consolation is to consult. Because these are difficult choices. These are very difficult choices. And a lot of people carry the burden of their choice and the sense of guilt with respect to their choice for the rest of their lifetime. They feel very, it's that they feel deeply conflicted about that. So it's not just your choice. It's not just that you cannot, or that if you want, you can. But that's the benefit where we have, these are some broad criteria with respect to it, but in the specific case, it is good, one, to get clarity. Okay, what are the range of choices that the guidance of Allah and His Messenger, what fiqh, as understood by qualified scholars, what range of choices do I have? So if one makes that choice, one made an informed choice, that I did something that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala permits. But then also how to see that loss, right? Or how to accept that difficult choice. And there's many people who accepted, they chose deliberately to have a child even though they knew that there was likely to be major developmental disabilities, etc. And they embraced that because such a child is, let's say if they're born with major lack of mental capacity, they're not accountable. So you have given birth to one of the people of Jannah. Now you don't choose to do that, right? But in that situation, this is a door to paradise. Such a child, if you raise it, they will intercede for you, right? In paradise, right? And it's not an easy situation to be in, but it is a source of tremendous mercy for the family if one would be able to handle that. So having clear guidance on that gives a lot of both clarity with respect to the choice and consolation with respect to whichever choice one made, and how to view that from the right spiritual vantage point. So in summary, if the mother has, is affected by the Zika virus, and doctors say that there's high probability that we can see that there'll be major birth defects in the child, etc., then before 120 days there is clear, it is permissible to have an abortion, but if one chose to go through with it, then there's nothing saying that you should or must do so, but one is not considered to be morally culpable in any way whatsoever.